Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special last-minute edition of the Tatiana Show. I'm very excited for our guest today. Josh is not joining me because I literally set this up maybe 30 minutes ago. But anyway, my guest today is Ryan Dawson, and he's a many things, but I know him from his YouTube videos, and I've gotten a lot of really interesting insights into the Middle East conflict and a lot of other subjects he covers quite extensively. So I'm very happy to have him join us. So welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I just finished an interview about the French elections. So I'm all
Oh,
over the map with politics, I guess, and
I know.
economics.
Well, you have a knack for remembering all sorts of things. I remember things in an overarching theme of what I thought of the information that was presented to me, but the ability to kind of call facts in immediately is a skill I don't have, and I wish I did. So
People think I'm autistic.
well, that's okay because maybe I think there's like the good one. There's autistic, which is not really has a good connotation. Then there's the other one that Asperger's. Everybody thinks the Asperger's people have sort of the corner on the weird brain market. Can you tell folks at home where, how you got into this and what qualifies you as this person that I'm, deeming awesome?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure when it started with political activism. I guess around fifth grade. I got to go. My brother won this like statewide contest and was going to give a speech at the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. And I took that opportunity to meet my congressman. It was Walter Beeman Jones. His son is now the congressman, so I've met both of them. And I remember he asked our whole class, what we needed, and I got in his face about why we needed a line item veto to cut pork out of bills, and I wanted to stop beach erosion in North Carolina. So I've just always been like this. I've
How did
written
you
a few
even know
books.
about that?
I mean, because I was 10 years old. I mean, but we are now finally getting beach nourishment this year, like next month. So it's taken that long to happen because Walter Jones died a few months later. So, well, everything he promised he didn't get to do, and it's just now happening. So that's probably started it. And I used to write about Native American issues, and I guess um, around maybe 95 after the Oklahoma City bombing, I started getting more active. I was also older and had the ability to get into it more. And then, of course, 9/11 and then the Iraq War really triggered me. I saw that one coming, told everyone they didn't have weapons of mass destruction because if they did, they would have produced evidence for it. And that never came because it wasn't true. So, and then it just was, I don't know. It As social media grew, I felt like, wow, there's a real opportunity to tell people about these things because at first I'm like, I made a website and I tell people in my college, things that were going on, but I thought there's no way to reach enough people for this to matter. They're just focused on other things. But then with MySpace and then Facebook and especially YouTube, I felt like, well, now I can just record these rants I go on all the time and share it with everybody. And then I got picked up by Sybil Edmonds from the FBI. I used to work for her. Um, I've sub-hosted a bunch of radio shows, made some movies, I've written some books. Um, I was so tired right now because it's almost 5 a.m.
But you're committed to you're committed to spreading the truth. So
Yeah, it's good. And, time zones are hard. I live in East Asia, people mostly English-speaking worlds on the other side of the globe. So this is normal, really.
So wait, why East Asia? Because I never caught that from your videos. Why there?
Why Japan? Why not?
Mhm.
Basically, George Bush got reelected, and I was like, I'm out. I'm done.
You're
Bye.
one of the, that's like 1/2% of the people that actually do that. A lot of
I
people
do
said
what
that
I
they
say.
would.
Always. I always do what I say. I tell people, judge a man by what he does. Because anyone can have good rhetoric, and anyone can have good intentions. But
Yeah, I'm
and
with
that
you on
doesn't
that one.
count. It's not like that's nothing, but your actions speak louder than words. And once I got over here, it was just so interesting. There's so many new experiences, and it's a challenge. It's another language, it's another culture, and I find that interesting. I'd moved around in the U.S. a lot already, but this was definitely the biggest move.
Cool. Are you going to come back?
This summer, I think I'll be back for about a month.
Okay,
That's about the
but you
longest.
like it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in a hurry to go lose my health care and have taxes paying for pointless wars. It's no rush. It's a nice place to visit, but
Fair enough.
yeah.
So during the elections, I was very uninterested because I just don't really believe the elections are very legitimate after 2012, seeing what happened to Ron Paul. If they're not rigging it on one end, it's rigged on a multitude of other levels, right? You know, from the media to the parties themselves to.
Well, for sure, and I think everyone would agree on this. It's rigged in the degree of this just how expensive it is to run.
Mhm.
I mean, realistically, you just can't win unless you're a millionaire or more.
Right.
And that's how it's been.
So I didn't like Trump when he was, but when it came down to Trump and Hillary, it wasn't even a question. Of course, Hillary was far worse because
Oh yeah.
to me, I actually took a lot of hope from the Trump win because I thought that was the FU to the system. Even if people are misguided, I did take it as a positive thing. I felt that people thought that they were going anti-war, but we've got the Moab, whatever bomb, and now what's happening with Syria, not to mention with Obamacare and all of the issues at home. My interest is, of course,
Bush
the
and
war.
Obama both used Moabs, by the way.
That's a good point to mention. I like
They
that. It's a
acted
good
like it
one.
was the first one. They hit the Saddam Hussein airport with a Moab during the Iraq War.
Wow.
Not even a war, an invasion. They used one in the first Gulf War. I remember that too. So it's the mother of all bombs. That's what it was
It just
called.
got more press this time, it sounds like.
Yeah, because there's a Republican doing it. So
Um,
when Bush was killing kids, there was a lot of flack to George Bush. I mean, 500,000 people in the streets in New York and probably 8 million around the world protesting what he did. When Obama did the same things, there was very little resistance, invading Libya, and he continued the Iraq War for a couple of years. This proxy war in Syria and put troops all over Africa, all that. But now the brand has changed. So, but it's like you said, you can't put a lot of faith in elections. We're not going to implement the changes we want through the system of electing, the state is not going to fix it. What you're really doing when you vote is damage control. I said my first video ever about Trump was he was the least bad option. And his rhetoric was good, but he was always a Zionist. He was always, very anti-Iran. And the only shining light is he does seem to want a working relationship with Russia, which is good. He did bring some jobs back. He did kill TPP. So that's already more than you're going to get with Hillary, but nothing to jump up and down about.
I agree, but some people said that TPP was already dead and he sort of just took credit for it. Would you agree with that statement or no?
No, it wasn't dead. I mean, the very first foreign leader to meet the new president was Shinzo Abe of Japan, and Japan was urging and still urging to have TPP for 2018. It died because without America being part of it, there is no TPP. Like some 90% of the trade was between the U.S. and Japan, and the others were just happy to be involved.
Okay, so what do you think of the bombs being dropped in Syria? How serious do you consider that? Some people say, "Oh, we didn't hit such a big target," and then other people are up in arms. And I have some follow-up questions. What do you think of
Well,
that
yeah,
Syria
I mean,
escalation?
it was morally wrong. It was stupid also because it's allegedly a response or a punishment for this chemical attack. But there was no investigation into who actually did the chemical attack. They didn't even have time for it. They just blamed it on Assad. And that's really, it's dumb because then the prior chemical attacks that were all done by the rebels. And then each one they tried to blame Assad. So why would you, on the fourth try, think, okay, this time the boy who cried wolf is really telling the truth and it must have been Assad. There's no motive. it's not going to make a dime's worth of difference battlefield wise to kill 70 people. And you could just as well have done it with a conventional bomb rather than using sarin or chlorine. And so this whole story didn't make sense. And it's also part of this sort of paternalistic attitude that the West has about the Middle East. Like, oh, we'll just give you a little spanking. We'll punish you because you used the wrong kind of death weapon. It's sad, but I think Trump was maneuvering that plus the Moab in Afghanistan to make his threats seem real for his North Korea China policy. He was meeting with Xi Jinping of China the day they hit Syria with cruise missiles. Yeah, and at the end of the day, they killed 7 people. They destroyed 6 planes. They didn't even blow up the runway. I think it's more of akin to like when they had blackmailed Bill Clinton with Lewinsky, and he went in and bombed some radar in Iraq. And 2 minutes after they didn't confirm his impeachment, he pulled out and stopped hitting Iraq. So Trump had all his domestic policies blocked. His healthcare policy was blocked in Congress. His tax plan seemed like it was going to go the same route, and he was only missing a few votes. He lobbed some cruise missiles at Syria, and now all the media suddenly says he's presidential and they love him, and he's the guy is still morally wrong because you're killing people and you're attacking your allies really against ISIS. No one's fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda harder than the Syrian army, and you're just acting like the Israelis hitting their air force bases. But I know why he did it. I wouldn't say, I don't think we're going to go to war with Syria, though, because the alternative is what? What are you going to do if Assad's gone? You're going to have Al Qaeda in power? And we know Trump knows this. But, you know, he had everyone on his back saying he's like a Russian agent and all that ridiculousness. But the big thing that got him to do it was his daughter, Ivanka.
Why do you say that?
Because that's what Trump's son said. He said that, I mean, Eric Trump wrote a piece basically saying, well, this exonerates us from the Russian connections because obviously Russia did not want the U.S. to bomb Syria. But in it, he said how his sister, which is Ivanka, had urged that whole beautiful baby speech, that's her words, not his.
I don't know that. I don't know that speech.
Oh, well, he just said the beautiful babies many times, referring to the chemical gas attack, as if babies have not been getting killed in this entire war, as if 800,000 children hadn't starved from the sanctions that the U.S. put on Iraq, that Hillary agreed with too, and Bernie, they all agreed with it. So suddenly these kids matter. You know, when the bus bomb happened maybe a week and a half later, those aren't beautiful babies. You know, of course they were kids too, but, you know, you can't fix everything with missiles, but the U.S. seems to only have a hammer, so everything has to be a nail. But we've spent decades in the Middle East, and we've just made Al Qaeda bigger and stronger, murdered a bunch of people, lost a bunch of money, with no positive results. What they need to do is stop sending covert aid to Al Qaeda, and the Syrians and Russians would wipe them out in no time.
You know, I have a good friend out in California, and she said to me, doesn't the United States have the obligation to stop these atrocities against these people? And I was obviously saying, no, we need to leave everybody alone and stop trying to go in and fix everything, because you're looking at a slice of what has gone on. You're not looking at how our previous interventions have led to where we're at in the first place. How would you go over that type of thing with somebody who might not be familiar with the idea of non-interventionism? You know, how would you say, well, what about the beautiful babies,
I would say
right?
historically they're being naive because they think, you know, in the not in the real world, but in fantasy land where you think, oh, we'll just go over there and stop the bad guys. We are the bad guys. We don't, that's not what we actually do when they say that. I mean, look how we fought with Vietnam for 9 years, killed 2 million people, 2 million in a very tiny country. And we also lost 55 to 58,000 Americans, mostly the poor. And what of it? You know what happened when we left and we made trade? That's how we had peace. That's how you stop all the killings. You don't do non-intervention was really be things like sanctions when you're saying, oh, it's not isolationist to trade with people. It's isolationist to not trade with people because you're isolating them. If you engage in business relationships, it's just like South Korea and Japan. They couldn't imagine going to war today, even though Japan occupied Korea for 40 years. There's too much money to lose. And that, peace comes through trade. You can use greed for a good purpose. However, I mean, it's good to have trade. And by isolating these places and putting sanctions, that's an act of war. You're cutting off all the business relationships, and then you can't just bomb your way out of things. These drone strikes are killing more innocents than they are terrorists, and that just makes everybody grow up with resentment. Think about kids in Iraq or Palestine. They've seen 3 or 4 wars in their life. Children grew up with that, seen their fathers humiliated or killed. Of course they hate America because we firebombed Fallujah. And we let all these Al-Qaeda rats, and we said, oh, we did it to get rid of Saddam. Well, whatever is on your list of why Saddam was bad, because he murdered people, because he arrested people without trial, because allegedly he had rape rooms or whatever, and he tortured people. Well, now there's more death and torture and rape and theft because of the war. You can't fix a problem like, oh, there's a bad guy by just going in and invading the entire country and blowing up all their infrastructure. That's not helping them. There's a great speech by this, I think he's about 13-year-old Iraqi boy called Please Stop Helping Us.
Oh, I think I've seen that. It was very, very moving.
Yeah, and it's true, and these kids get it. Stop helping us because we're not helping anything. How are we helping in Syria when they're simultaneously aiding the Israelis and al-Sham, who got a 9/11 plotter out of jail, by the way, and always accidentally bombing the Syrian army, and then they said they were fighting ISIS at the same time. You can't fight a war on 2 fronts like that. But that's what the MIC wants. It wants to prolong conflict for as long as possible so that Lockheed Martin and Boeing and these people can sell a lot of planes and make a lot of money. And the peace lobby doesn't have any toys like that.
I think it's just very overwhelming looking at all of this stuff because, I think people thought that they were getting the anti-war candidate, but looks like both of them are pro-war. What do you think that people can do besides just sit back and watch in horror at the acts being committed in, our name, for example? Like, as an American, it's embarrassing, our foreign policy. It's horrifying. But there are so many financial incentives to keep that military industrial complex in power. What do you think? How do people do that? I mean, I do stuff with Bitcoin because I think that makes the dollar irrelevant in some ways, right? And I think that's actually a concrete thing that you could do because I found protesting with a sign was almost like begging your master to let you free, but your master has no incentive to do so.
Yeah, that kind of theatrical, I agree there. That kind of theatrical stuff, like going in the street and yelling and singing, and it's pretty much a waste of time. We had this discussion earlier today. What you just asked me, I would aim at some low-hanging fruit. And we have to do this the adult way. We have to actually go to the Capitol building, just like AIPAC and all these other lobbies do, directly and talk to them as adults. And the 2 targets that I would aim at that I think you could get all Americans behind, or practically all, is stop aiding Al-Qaeda, covertly and overtly. Who wants to aid Al-Qaeda? This enemy of my enemy is my friend is, no, it's not. They're your enemy. And they're just using you, and we'll turn on you in a second. And we have to end our support for Saudi Arabia's war on Yemen. If you can sever that Saudi-U.S. axis, and there isn't a big Saudi Arabian lobby, not really. There's a huge Israeli lobby, but the Saudis, I mean, if you give me enough time, I can explain their direct involvement in September 11th. And it's not just because a lot of hijackers are from there. We have some really concrete evidence that we know the Senate is aware of because it came out of their own reports. That has to end. And Trump has spoken ill of Saudi Arabia, but hasn't really done anything yet. So the pressure has to be there. But ultimately, if you want to end wars, Congress has the power of the purse, as the late Senator Robert Byrd said. They control the money, and if they cut it off, there is no war. That's where we have to focus. You're not going to reach the president anyway. You can go legally meet your representative, though, or at least a legislative assistant, and the LAs run everything anyway. But we don't have a peace lobby. We have people by the tens of thousands will go out in the street with signs and chant stuff. And like Occupy Wall Street was there for months. If you took all those thousands of people and went into the Capitol building, it would be done in a day. They don't do that. And I think a lot of these groups answer, and some of these, kind of leftist anti-war organizations, they're wasting all this energy and time by putting people on these completely directionless paths to nowhere. When, look, we don't live in a North Korean style dictatorship. You do have representatives, and you are allowed to walk into the building like a grown-up and talk to them. But very few people are doing that. But the ones who are doing it are getting what they want. Lobbies work.
I think that's actually a pretty practical solution. I don't know about everybody actually going to DC, but they can go into their state capital and go and speak to people there. I
Well,
don't
there are
know.
people in DC already. What I'm saying is, like, you don't need thousands to go in there. You just need like 6 or 7 people to actually go. But they have those thousands behind them, so they can say, "Look, I'm part of this group." But you just get the most articulate among you to go there. If they don't live in DC, fine, we can pay for that. But there are plenty of people who live in Virginia or Maryland or something that could go right in. And then, like you said, if you're in California or something, then go to your state capital or find someone who lives near there. There's over 70% of the country is anti-war, but it
Yeah,
doesn't make it.
and yet the media makes it seem, I just find I guess I want to say cognitive dissonance, and I'm not sure if I'm using it correctly, but I think I am. The way that people think that the left is anti-war, but then CNN is left, and now they like Trump because he's being war, and now there's just no one left that's anti-war. I find it amazing that this is something that people are just, doesn't anybody else notice that there's something wrong with this equation? I
Yeah,
mean, what
the
do the
left,
people that hate Trump say about Trump going to war? Do they also hate that, or do they like it
no,
because the
they
media
just
tells them
hate
it's
him.
good?
Like, there was never a real leftist anti-war movement. There was an anti-Bush movement, an anti-Republican movement. Like I said with Obama, he got a pass on everything from that side. And then the right, which had been so pro-war during the Bush era, could not criticize Obama on those points because he was doing the same thing Bush did. So they had to go in this ridiculous, he's a secret Muslim from Kenya with no birth certificate, and that sort of lunacy, because they couldn't talk about policies because he had the same policies that Bush had had, and the left just ignored it. They were completely asleep. They hate Trump, but CNN is definitely a pro-war channel. You have a former AIPAC employee, Wolf Blitzer, up there pontificating on about shock and awe. He's about to have an orgasm on TV when Iraq was getting bombed. All these people pushed for the war. MSNBC did, Fox did, all of them did. The entire televised network on all these alphabet soup, I call it ABC and NBCS, that's all of them. They are cheerleaders for the Pentagon. And you look at their commercials, what is it? It's all big pharma and car commercials, right? Like, so you can't listen to the fake news. And Trump got people excited calling them fake news. Is like, he knows what to say. He's a businessman. He knows how to. He's a WWF like participant. He knows how to manipulate the crowds. But then he gets in there and he realizes, I can't do half of this.
Do you think that he still has good intention, or do you think he's just a terrible person at this point that is a fraud?
I think both. I think he's a dick. I mean, he's just a basic Yankee New York businessman that uses people and runs over them and all. But I do think he really does care about America. Like, he has this sort of nationalism and patriotism about him. But he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he gets so convinced the most ridiculous things so easily. He used to be a birther. He finally changed his mind. He used to be a lot of weird things. He's whoever's whispering in his ear is who really controls things. And unfortunately, that's the Kushners and his daughter right now. That's this relationship we got to break, but I don't know if it's possible.
Wow. What do you think about the situation in North Korea? Do you think we're headed toward World War III? I mean, is that something that people should be concerned about? And
No,
again, what's the
we're
method?
not
Call
headed
our
to World War
congressman?
III. It's kind of hilarious, the North Korea situation, because not just Trump, but McMaster's and Admiral Harris and all of them basically were saying that the Carl Vinson aircraft carrier was headed to North Korea during their anniversary of the founding. It was the 105th or 15th or something, and that was on Easter. And actually, the Carl Vinson was doing drills in Australia at that moment. So then, during the 85th anniversary of the founding of the military in North Korea, which was last Tuesday, or just 2 days ago, then they sent the aircraft carrier. But Trump and these admirals didn't even know where the boat was. But the whole thing was
Why not?
shown because they get bad information. They didn't check it. I mean, Admiral Harris, he knew, he must have known they were going to Australia. It was pre-scheduled. And they said, we're on our way to North Korea, which was true. It just wasn't in a straight shot. They were making some detours first before they went up there. But he was putting so much pressure on China and saying, look, I'll go in unilaterally. And because he Moabbed Afghanistan and he hit Syria with cruise missiles, he looked crazy enough to attack North Korea unilaterally. Of course, he didn't really do it. But if you know much about military strategy, you know that you're not going to send an aircraft carrier just to go start a war with North Korea. You're going to need long-range bombers and nuclear submarines. That's what you really do. And they didn't. And then they had 2 Japanese destroyers escort them. Japan has 43 destroyers. The fact that there are only 2 escorts means it's about saving face. It's a big show, saber rattling, and that's what they want. They don't want to defeat North Korea, and they don't want North Korea out of control. They just want them to be enough of a threat that they can justify base expansions in Okinawa and South Korea and make a lot of money. And China does the same thing. They're enough threats so that China can build up its MIC. And this whole thing with sanctions are ridiculous because North Korea has been skirting the sanctions for decades. They just use false flags, and I don't mean attack. I mean they actually put another country's flags on their boats, and then they go and trade like as Cambodia, even though they're actually North Korea. And the black markets are created by the sanctions. Like, for example, last year, which is only a few months ago, really, they took a huge shipment of arms to Egypt, which had an embargo against it, and they did it pretending to be Cambodian. And the Egyptians bought a bunch of weapons from the Koreans. The Koreans got money they desperately needed that they then laundered through and got supplies and so on. And that market wouldn't have existed if we had not had sanctions on Egypt and also had sanctions on North Korea. I mean, sanctions create black markets and they collective punishment, mostly on the poor. People in North Korea are starving to death. They had huge famines in the 90s. Millions died. You try the carrot instead of the stick, and I've told people this so many times. We were really close in 1994, and then also in 96, with the 6-member talk that was going to reward North Korea in steps for dismantling their nuclear program. And North Korea agreed to this, and South Korea agreed to this, and so did Russia and China. But Japan and the United States said no. Japan at the time was trying to get its hostages back, so they were really pissed at them. But the U.S. never wants to solve the problem, even when everyone else is on board. Nope. So, we could probably go back to that and fix the problem with North Korea, at least being a threat to the United States. And I think we should be sending them food aid, not through the World Food Program, just direct. There's a lot of things I wish we would do with North Korea, but threatening them with an aircraft carrier, which is not even the tool you need if you're going to invade, is one of the dumbest things possible. But that's what they did.
This conversation is somewhat depressing. I think it's very interesting, but at the same time, if everybody stands to make money from it, and I don't know where's the incentive for the people that make those decisions to change. I mean, is it just more public pressure will drive down their profit? I mean, what's the move?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're really playing with fire though, because North Korea has shot artillery into the south that killed people in 2010. Like, they cannot play this game forever because they are building nuclear weapons. They're going to have their 6th test here soon. They are able to skirt the sanctions. It's proven. I mean, they have plenty of parties. I'm talking about the leadership in North Korea. They're not suffering at all from They don't care about their public any more than any government does. What needs to happen is what you're doing right now. Step one is creating new media so that people can have a nuanced and educated and informed opinion on these things. Because a lot of Americans, if you said name 2 cities in North Korea, they can't, and that's not. It's fine. I mean, but if they had a functional news media, they would, because you can name cities in Iraq, you can name cities in Syria, because we've been bombing them, right? So people can learn things they had not learned before if they realize why it needs to be known. But our media just acts like North Korea is completely crazy and everything's their fault. We're just reacting to them. No, we're reacting to each other. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. You've got a very aggressive nation like the United States that invaded Iraq, invaded Libya, both of whom gave up their weapons of mass destruction programs, and they're telling them to give theirs up. There's no way they're going to give that up. That's their deterrent against the United States. And they're correct in that, because the US probably would love it. But there's no war game scenario. The US would win that war, but there's no way it'd be pirate victory, because South Korea at minimal would lose a city. And that's too much. And so there is no military solution in North Korea, so Saudi don't even talk about it. That option should not be on the table. We can't sacrifice Seoul, the capital of South Korea, to invade the North. You just can't do it. There has to be a political solution, and I think the carrot would be better than the stick. But these machismo guys, tiny hands man or whatever, he surrounded his cabinet with military generals, and what do you think they're going to say? And the ones who are sort of sane, like Michael Flynn, are already gone. All the people that were hands off Syria are dropping out. So we in the press, we have to get on it, and we have to really go back to Congress too. And the people did that. Remember when Obama first wanted to go into Syria with ground troops? Congress said no, because they got thousands of calls saying not to do it. And that's kind of the Iraq War syndrome. That war was such a disaster that people said, no, we're not doing this to Syria. And we heard John Kerry say on those leaked tapes. Did you hear when Secretary Kerry? He was saying, well, John Kerry had these leaked tapes, and in it he's talking to the heads of these moderate head choppers, right? And he's saying, well, we want to go in on the ground, but Congress just won't allow it. So he's complaining about them. So they want you to be defeatist and think you can't do anything, and think that talking to Congress does nothing. That's what they've tried to push into everyone's head, because Congress does everything. And if you don't talk to them, you forfeit, because everything else you do isn't going to matter, short of violence or something.
It makes me think about all my nasty letters that I've written to them over the years. I wonder if perhaps they may be better served with a slightly nicer approach at first. But I really have very little respect for a lot of our elected officials. Do you think
I used to slam Joe Lieberman daily?
Oh, well, there's a lot to work with.
Yeah.
Do you think, like, I made this point the other day, and I'm not sure if I was right. Do you think, I guess I can't understand why we are able to tell another country that they can't have a nuclear weapon when we have the biggest nuclear weapons, and we're always going around kicking everybody's like asses. So that seems really hypocritical.
And the only country to have used them is the United States. Right.
So why is North Korea not allowed? I mean, yeah, maybe he's a horrible person, but I don't know. Do we have a leg to stand on in that argument? Would you say that these smaller countries that want to go nuclear or have nuclear capabilities, would you allow them to? If you could wave a magic wand, what do you think of that idea?
I don't want anyone to have nuclear weapons, especially Kim Jong-un, but you have to, I mean, what do you expect them to do? Like, based on our actions, you should anticipate that they're going to race to get the bomb, because we're doing everything possible that would cause someone to want to have the bomb, because they see it as a deterrent and mutual destruction. But if we were not invading everyone and all of that, if the scenario was different, then they wouldn't be scrambling to get a bomb, because there wouldn't be a purpose for it. And if they were, I mean, the way it is now, they're going to have nuclear weapons and they're going to have ICBMs if we just continue with the same pattern of sanctions and saying he's crazy. They're going to have it. And then what are they going to do? And what my fear is, they're saying they know this and they go, man, we have this one chance to get them before they get the bomb. Maybe if we hit them all at once real fast, they start doing these crazy scenarios, All you'd have to do is show up with an abundance of food. That would be the biggest, easiest way to manipulate North Korea. They're dying, literally dying in the streets. And I've talked to North Korean refugees that made it to South Korea and I've seen them. This one guy saw a little girl, 2 years old, die. And he said how the flies go around their nose and mouth and anus. They're just ready, before they're dead, knowing that they're about to die so they can get in and get their meat. It's the horror stories. But Yemen's facing starvation, and they're worried about what North Korea might do in the future, and Saudi Arabia's doing it right now in front of us. They don't care about humanity. And they'll make up a humanitarian pretext for missiles in other places. But when it's clear cut, like Saudi Arabia's aggression on Yemen, nothing happens. They don't care. It's all about the money. And it's also our fault because we're quiet. We talk to each other on Facebook and in coffee shops and stuff, and we're not doing the most effective action possible, which would be calling Congress and showing up in their face. I can't stress that enough. It has to happen.
In the Liberty movement, there seem to be very limited resources, and I get really frustrated, with scam projects and this nonsense supporting this person. I almost think that taking just a budget and getting people and paying them, $10, $15, $20 an hour to just call Congress and talk to them, even activists, right? They want to work from home. Fine. Here, you can work from home and you can call these people and tell them.
You get a group of people and you say, I'm calling at 7:30, you call at 8, you call at 8:15, you call at 8:30, and you line all your people up like that and you just constantly call them all day. You could cover that.
An easy thing to implement. You know what I mean? It doesn't take a lot of time.
Yeah. We did that to Home Depot. Like, we've done that to certain corporations when I was in college. It's so easy if you're a college student. There are a whole bunch of people there your age, and you just tell them the plan and you pass a cell phone around right down the line. You can call them all with the same phone. It doesn't matter. And just slam them on that. And we got effective change from DuPont, Home Depot, all these companies just by being the squeaky wheel, whining, do that cry bully tactic back, But yeah, I mean, there are people who listen, and it's not just Ron Paul or Walter Jones or Thomas Massey or something. There are others in there, but they're not hearing your voice, and they're hearing the other voice every day about war profiteering.
So maybe even calling them and telling them that we think that they're doing a good job. I mean, I know that seems maybe a little bit silly, but I think that giving them the support, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think acknowledging their work beyond
and no one does that almost. They don't say, because we had two former congressmen at this recent TILAP conference on the Israeli lobby who said, look, there's no real reward for going against the flow, and there's a lot of incentive to do it. And so they actually said, you need to call, when your congressman does say no, you better call and say thanks and show your support and let them know they're not alone. But too often, we'll get mad when they do the bad thing, but when they do something right, they're ignored, right? So what you say is true. When they finally do something right, like saying read the 28 pages, which finally were released, and that was because of the work of a core group of congressmen, call them up and say thanks. And yeah, calling, one thing you could do before you call is gather up a group of friends, explain what the issue is and that we're going to call on a particular day, just like money bombs, whatever. You have a phone bomb, and everybody hit the same guy or the same lady, within a 3 or 4 hour period. That's how you can organize and be more effective with your phone calls. And then as far as what you're going to say on the phone, I've been thinking about holding like a workshop on how to lobby. Maybe I could do it digitally.
So I'd love that. That'd be really cool.
I started when I was 10. And it's just really just honestly telling them what you want, You find somebody in your group that's a good talker, and then, go in pairs, because it's just there's a reason for that. But you want to go in and as a pair is better. One person's articulating the most and saying things, but if they need to, you get someone to jump in. It's better to have group effectiveness. It's better to show, that you're part of something. Have your little business cards ready, look professional, dress the right way. Shouldn't be like that, but guess what? It is. So let's be practical, right? Go in as a team, lay out your points, talk to the LA. You're probably not going to get to talk to the congressman, but you say, I want to talk to his legislative assistant. And they'll say which one, and depending on what your issue is, you say, oh, for agriculture, oh, for this, oh, for that. And they 9 times out of 10 will have some hour open that day where they will meet with you. They'll ask you what group you're with. You can say, I'm a concerned citizen. Or you can, if you're part of a group, you tell them. It's not that hard. It's just intimidating because you walk in the Hart Building or something and it's all this fancy art and, so the giant doors and all this is just like, oh man, I'm in the US government, but just gotta get over that. They're just people. And it's a bunch of 20-something-year-olds running the country with the LAs. So it's just, you gotta do it. And I see so much energy wasted on like theatrics.
And Facebook battles that never go anywhere.
Battles. Yeah, I mean, Facebook should just be a place where you can like post news, like read this and get information out. But don't feed the trolls. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, ultimately, the goal of all this awareness and saying what's going on is so that people have enough ammo so that when they do go, they know what they're talking about. And I can recite all the pre-war lies to Iraq or Iran's nuclear program or any, like, right now off the top of my head, and I try and get that information out there so enough people can go in and say, look, we've seen this before. There's so much we need to do. I think the workshop's a good idea. I think what you said, like raising small funds to, pay somebody to go lobby or even a big phone-a-thon, that would be worth it too. It doesn't take that much. It costs way less to tell the truth than it does to lie.
I like it. I feel like we're getting some really good stuff. I don't want to overwhelm my listeners with too much at once. I would love to have you on if you'd be up for it. But I do have a question that me and Brian were talking about before you came on. Why do you think, and it's sort of a big one, what do you think started the destabilization and trouble in the Middle East that's led to what's happening today, maybe even 100 years ago? Why is the Middle East such a mess? It should be easy to answer.
Really, started in World War I, but currently the biggest agitator in the Middle East by far is Israel and Saudi Arabia. And you'd have to rewind to the 70s when, after the war in 1973 of Yom Kippur, and the U.S. was having gas shortages and people waiting in lines for gasoline and stuff because OPEC used the oil weapon and said, well, we can't beat you militarily, but you know what? We can turn the gas off. The CIA realized they had to break it, just like, having a scab when you're boycotting or having a rate buster. They said, we got to break up this belt. And Saudi Arabia has the largest oil reserves. So they were brought under the U.S. wing. And they created this thing called the Safari Club because the U.S. and Israel had already been tightly together since 1963. You know what happened there in November. And so it was George Bush Sr. was the DCI, and they created this group. And this is when you start seeing all these religious fanatics, whether they're Zionist Jews or Takfiri militants, Wahhabi Islam, all the crazies get all the money, because they were using these religious nuts to fight the evil atheist communists. Communism is the bad part of communism, not atheism. But it worked, and they flooded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, including Osama bin Laden, financed by the CIA. And so from that time in the 70s, the Israelis and the Saudis have been our cops on the block, so to speak. And they use them as paramilitary groups. They set up all these madrasas and religious schools to teach fundamentalist Islam, because that generates future cannon fodder for proxy wars, which is what happened in Libya, happened in Syria, happened in Pakistan, Iraq. That's what's going on. But what Israel is doing to Palestine is not only wasted trillions of dollars for the U.S. and it's completely immoral, but the entire Arab world sees that and is motivated by that to go against U.S. interests and hate us with the utmost passion because we're supporting a racial apartheid. It just, I mean, they butcher kids and burn churches. I mean, you know, it is. I, it makes me upset to say all the bad things they're doing, but they do it openly. Saudi Arabia too. They have a monarchy. Until recently, women couldn't drive a car. People get stoned to death. Gay people get thrown off roofs. You know, it is such a backwards religious ideology, but it's completely funded and financed by CIA uh, because they want. That's what they want. They've, it's in game theory. If you back the crazies, you will have conflict, and perpetual conflict is perpetual profit in the eyes of the MIC. They wanted a buffer zone in the Suez Canal. That was part of the reason for supporting the Israeli state. And there's also deep, legit religious ties where a lot of evangelical Christians think that they believe in the storybook version of history, not history, but the biblical history, that there's always Jews there and blah, 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 as if you can racially inherit land. But I mean, if you look at these wars, all the pre-war lies about Iraq came from a group in the Pentagon called the Office of Special Plans, made up of Israeli partisans. Almost the entire Defense Planning Board under Richard Perle were dual citizens with Israel. And it's the Weekly Standard and PNAC that were writing about all these myths about yellow cake uranium, uh, chemical weapons under the palaces of Saddam, and then Judith Miller's lie about anthrax on mobile weapons labs. And you can trace it all back to the same place. Syria too. Oded Yanan wrote it out. The Israeli interests are why we had a war in Iraq, why we're in Syria, and why we put sanctions on Iran. That's the special relationship that has to break, is the main agitators. Not everything, but they're number one, followed by Saudi Arabia. Because Israel's not going to get its skin in the game. The Saudis recruit. And a lot of these soldiers that are fighting with ISIS and stuff were in work or starved positions. The Libyan war spilled over into Mali. You know, you had all the surplus weapons floating around, former bodyguards and soldiers. It is so disgusting, but it could be fixed so easy. You end aid to Israel. And they would negotiate tomorrow if they didn't have that money.
Negotiate with what? With Palestine?
They would have to negotiate with Palestine immediately if they did not have U.S. support. The UN passes resolutions all the time, or tries to, where it's 140 to 1, with the one vote against it is the United States. They would have passed a lot more, but they didn't even bother writing them because they know America is going to side with Israel no matter what. And even Britain and Canada and some of these other states that are very beholden to the lobby, you know, when it comes to these human rights violations, that you just can't hide it, you know. And they will vote with the rest of the world condemning house demolitions and the settlements and the bad, terrible things the Israeli state is doing. But every single time the U.S. has veto power in the Security Council, they will say no, and then nothing is enforced. But you cut that link between the U.S. and Israel, Israel has no other friends, and they will have to negotiate for peace.
Oh, it's such a complicated situation over there. What about the people that say Palestine is doing something bad? Do you think that there's any credit to that? I mean, also after this going back and forth.
Hamas does bad things, but what do you expect? Like, how would any state react? Let's say Mexico was like the West Bank, or let's say Texas was. What would happen if a bunch of Mexicans poured into Texas and just took some bulldozers and knocked people's houses down and then built new houses there for racially Mexican only homes, put a wall around it, had a standing army protecting it, and just started gobbling up land in Texas? Like, do you think people in Texas might be violent? Like, obviously, like, what do you expect? And Hamas is the enemy that Israel wants. That's the enemy they need. They don't do anything good for Not well, they do some good things, but they're really bad for Palestine. They'll fire a rocket into an empty field and it doesn't do any damage or anything to Israel. It just gives them a pretext to come bomb the mess out of Gaza collectively. So yeah, it's a cycle of revenge, and there are some really anti-Semitic Palestinians that do want to push Israel into the sea. It's not like they don't exist, um, but they don't have the power to do that. They're not the ones with nuclear weapons and F-15s. Israel is, and the reason they hate them so much is because Israel's been routinely confiscating land and murdering them and occupying them and putting a blockade and counting their calories. All these injustices. What do you expect the relationship to be like? They have to end the occupation. You can't simultaneously occupy people and steal their land and pretend like you want peace. Yeah.
But how, okay, so I have a lot of Jewish friends, you know, they would probably listen to this and just reactively be appalled because I think a lot of Jewish people feel that, you know, World War II was very bad. They want their own place. They want to feel, you know, how can I, like, what would you say to somebody like that? They're Jewish, their family's from Israel, or they go there every summer. They feel a connection. They're
Mm-hmm.
not bad people, you know, necessarily. They're just regular people that have a certain pride, or they have a certain
Sure. Well, is there
impression.
any then the Israel already exists? Is there any reason they have to keep expanding into the West Bank? You got to take that from people too. In the same argument, shouldn't Palestinians also have a homeland?
Mhm.
Uh, you don't think war has been bad for them? Uh, they were under Ottoman rule. They were under another empire. Kurds don't have their own state. Lots of different ethnic groups don't have a state. Lots of different religious or non-religious groups. There's no atheist state or something. This sort of sense of ethnic nationalism is silly. You know, we did win World War II, so the Jews didn't have to go anywhere. They just stayed where they were. We were on the winning side. I mean, there are more Jews in America or New Jersey than they are in Tel Aviv. I mean, it, you don't have to run. You can preserve your culture and practice your religion just like every other group in the United States does, without the need of a exclusively Jewish country. And the West Bank is Jewish only settlements. It's not like open for anyone to live there. It's as bad as racial segregation, as saying like a white only bus and white only school. Like most of the world gave up on that 50 years ago. So we can assimilate and integrate, and different races can ride the same bus and use the same road without color coded license plates. So we don't have to segregate high schools, and it's not going to destroy your religion or anything to do that. And they know that, but it's just an excuse. Like, yeah, World War II was bad. Millions of Ukrainians died, millions of Germans died, millions of lots of people died. Uh, but they didn't go then and take over someone else's native land and push them out. You could live together on the same piece of dirt. Like it doesn't have to be exclusively your team or something. Can you imagine that if we just said, "Oh, we're just going to make a city of Republicans and draw the Democrats out," or vice versa? No, you can just live. Why'd you have to kill the Native Americans? Why couldn't you live together? Like it's simple. Like what? Just live with the Palestinians then, just like you do now, right? I mean, it's so it'd be like, oh, let's make a state for blonde people, you know, because their hair is different. It doesn't matter. Like, just live next. I live in Asia, like 99% Japanese. I'm the only Ryan here. So what? It's so silly to me that people think they have to have an ethnically pure state of people who look and think like them, or they're never going to exist anymore. It's just not true.
On the counter to that, what do you think of the concerns about you know, Syrian refugees coming to America and just Muslims spreading throughout Europe? Do you think that that's something to be concerned about? And would it be any different from this?
Well, the majority of Muslims that are migrating to Europe are not from Syria and are not war refugees. I think you have a responsibility for war refugees because if you export bombs, you import refugees. But a lot of them that are coming to Europe are just doing it for economic reasons, and a lot of them are from Northern Africa and all kinds of places that are not from Syria. And like when you see a boatload of Africans with blacks that say they're Syrian refugees, you ought to question that and go, I doubt it. And and I'm not saying people are ants or anything, but I made this analogy once, like if you don't want ants, don't put sugar on the floor. If you don't want economic refugees, stop giving away free stuff. That is the quickest way to pull the incentive off and say, we're not going to house you and feed you and do all this, and then they won't go there. I mean, that's the incentive. If you get the sugar off the floor, you won't have ants. Simple. And it's okay to have borders, because if you have a lot of people who don't speak the language, how are they supposed to work and get? I mean, there's a reason we assimilate and take in, enough migrants, immigrants over time and assimilate them into the culture. Like the United States or Brazil or Canada, there's a lot of places, countries that are multi-ethnic and all that, many different religions and everything, and they can all live in the same place because they still have a core value system of their nation. But when you bring in a lot of third world ideas into the first world, you don't bring them up. You're just bringing yourself down. And it is an economic reality. And it's silly to me for people to be like, oh, that's xenophobic or racist or Islamophobic. Like, no, it is just forget, it doesn't matter what their religion is or whatever. If you pull a bunch of people into one area who are not working, you cannot pay for them all. There's a nice presentation a guy did with like little gumballs in it once. We cannot absorb the third world. We have to fix their infrastructure where they live, not just move them all to somewhere else. Stop bombing people. Stop predatory lending with the IMF. Stop all these actions that are causing the refugees in the first place, and stop giving the economic incentives, and there won't be a refugee crisis. You don't see a bunch of refugees trying to come into Japan, and it's the second wealthiest nation in the world, but they're not coming here. Why? Because there's no incentive. But Japan gave $100 million to Palestine and Syria for reconstruction. That's the way Japan helps them.
Yeah,
I
it's
think Europe's
amazing
a
how much.
prominent example.
Yeah, it's amazing how much money is wasted on bombing people. I mean, if they just stopped bombing people and just gave them that financial equivalent in food and infrastructure, problem solved. Actually, it's a very encouraging point because some of this stuff gets a little, I don't know, really just flatly depressing, but such a simple solution that's logical. It's really not that hard to implement if you have the will.
Yeah.
Um,
The cost of the F-35 program alone, $1.5 trillion for a plane that doesn't even work. You could have fixed, I mean, we say these things like, oh, you could have fixed clean water for X number of places and all that, but you won't, because those things never get that kind of money. But I don't think you would even have to loan or do any of that in the first place if we didn't have all these wars and predatory lending practices and neocolonialism, because they build it themselves. You look at the states that have managed to avoid the war and conflict, like in Dubai, they've got rotating cities and lots of wealth, and they still have problems, but starvation ain't one of them. It's not like people are incapable of building the things they need on their own. There are plenty of cities all over the world built by those people who live there. They're just victims of this global finance capitalism, which is so entrenched in cronyism that depreciates their currencies. And this is another reason to get into cryptocurrencies and to diversify. But the solutions aren't that complicated to say. It's just implementing them. And again, we can't get that done unless we go to the people in charge, which is Congress. So I've made films about like neocolonialism. Africa is a film I made explaining transfer pricing and all the little tricks they do to keep the third world. You can expose all that, but that information doesn't really help them unless you use it to then change the policies. And it happens sometimes, like Lincor got in trouble, and there are investigations and all, but they're just not televised. So again, you gotta change the media too, which you're doing, which I'm doing. That's really important there.
What do you
Media.
think about Well, what do you think about YouTube censoring everybody lately, and Twitter censoring everybody, and Facebook censoring everybody? Do you think that people will have to just migrate to a new platform, or what do you think is going to happen?
I think that would be the free market solution. I was banned on Twitter for only a day. I was banned from Facebook for 2 months, 1 month, and then another month right after. YouTube doesn't monetize anything. A lot of people are going to VidMe. I know Sargon of Akkad, a friend of mine, I was on his show one time too. They're over there. Right now, it's kind of limited to 15 minutes. So YouTube has the advantage of that long thing. But people are going to migrate. And, back in the day, MySpace was like the third or fourth largest site on the entire internet. It was like Google and Yahoo and MySpace. And now look at them, gone. Everyone went to Facebook.
I'd like to see that happen at
Oh,
Facebook.
I'd
I
love to see
hate
that.
them. I hate them with a passion. They're my most hated of them all, I think.
Facebook, these Zuckerberg people, and they're creating these echo chambers. That's why I started my own little Google Hangout thing. But VK, the kind of Russian Facebook, it's starting to grow, and it's not growing from all the Russians. It's growing from all the disgruntled Americans and other Western countries that have been banned for nothing on Facebook because of the nanny state over there. I mean, Facebook will ban you for anything that they don't like. And so they're all flocking over to VK. And I would love to see a MySpace moment where Facebook just nosedived and everyone moved to the new thing. And so, but they saw what happened to MySpace, and so they're trying to preempt it. Like when Sue came around, Facebook was hard trying to get rid of them. But VK has Russian support, and it's poetic justice for a Russian Facebook. It's so like I grew up in the Cold War with the USSR and all that, and now it's like they have the free speech. We get Zuckerberg.
Yeah,
Like
I know.
China
It's
just
pretty bad
outright
when
bans
Russia
people
Today
all
is
the
better
time.
than regular news.
Russia Today is far better than
I love Russia Today.
it's great. I mean, when it ain't talking about Russia, but
Yeah,
like
sure. Yeah, they just
that,
have
that's
to
why we
let
have
the
to become the media.
Yeah, I think that's I have a new record, and the first song is called Make a YouTube Video, and it's all about that. And sometimes I cringe because I start thinking, well, YouTube starts now, but it's really about that ethos of motivating people to, we don't have to just argue over a beer. You have the internet, you can make a tweet, you could, do all these different things to engage with people, even with the blockades. Um, yeah, I
I
don't
know
know.
I've red pilled a lot of people on 9/11, and it's because of the internet, 100%. Like,
Yeah, I saw a portion of your 9/11 video, but it's very long. For people that are interested, I know that some people, they go nuts when they hear 9/11 and
because
all
there's a
that.
lot of really goofy stuff about 9/11. It's just like the one way of covering up any conspiracy is to create a bunch of nonsense ones so that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that, I mean, 9/11's gone full kook where they're talking about holograms or whatever. It's completely nuts, aliens and stuff. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't foreknowledge about the event and that states don't cooperate. And that, I mean, oh, conspiracy, people have a problem with that. Listen, every covert operation that's ever been done is a conspiracy. And that's what the CIA does. That's what intelligence groups do. They get together and lie to people about what they're secretly doing, which would otherwise be illegal. It's, it's not that hard. But it's just like the Iraq War. It's weird because the Iraq War has not been kookified as much as 9/11. But I think there's one guy who's almost solely responsible for turning 9/11 into a giant tar baby, and that's Alex Jones. But
Wow.
he's getting sued left and right now. Like 3 different groups are suing him, so he might be going down in flames. That would really help the movement, is to get rid of these charlatans and tell you the dollar is going to collapse tomorrow every day and World War III is upon us and they're going to release a biovirus and kill 80% of whatever, fear mongers. But fear sells. If we get rid of these televangelists of the liberty movement, that would help a lot. Just quit listening to them. I mean, this guy
Yeah.
was saying 2 days ago that they're burning down cities in France every week. I think they'd run out of cities. But he said he also slept with 150 women by the time he was 16. He said this dude looks like an overstuffed walrus and with hair on its knuckles, and he's no.
Well, on that happy note, I think we really got to a lot of really great stuff. I'm so happy that we were able to make it work. Can you tell people what links you want to listen, you want them to check out? I know your Twitter is Rye Liberty, RY Liberty.
Right?
Your
Yeah.
YouTube is difficult.
Twitter's cool because I'm colorful and I get into it with people, but usually whatever I post on YouTube or the anti-neocon report or whatever will be tweeted. So that's probably the easiest thing, is just add that. And then, yeah, YouTube, you can just write YouTube Ryan Dawson. It'll get to it. It's Rise 2 cents. I know that I didn't. It was my backup name. I had another name that YouTube erased in 2008, December. It erased all my videos and everything. And so the one I had made with like bad name that I never used ended up being the one I had to use because they wouldn't let me create any new accounts. But I had that one before I got banned.
Uh-huh.
See what I'm saying? I made it. I go, oh, that's a dumb name. So I just made another email, made another one, right?
Yeah.
That one got deleted, so I went back to the first one. I was stuck there. But there's anc.report. And
You're also on Patreon, right?
yeah, I'm on Patreon. It's just Patreon/Ryan Dawson. We got a lot of cool stuff going on in Patreon. Patreon's got like this interview will be up there, and the interview I just did with Joaquin Flores, and I did Bill Nye to the Woodshed #2 is up there. An hour-long podcast with our Big Dumb Mouth is on there. A lot of good things, a lot of reports on North Korea and Syria. I had another Syrian war update today because Al Qaeda's Air Force struck again. The Israelis hit Damascus, So yeah, Patreon's cool. For as little as $1 a month, that's $1. It's not a big deal. I
Yeah,
hope.
I
If it
agree.
is, then
No, I'm
yeah,
gonna join your Patreon. You're gonna be
I
my
think
first Patreon person I've ever supported, actually. Now I think about it. I'm gonna do it right after this.
well, you think
Um,
about it, it's for the entire year. It could be $12. But
and
for
I
me,
think also, it's important to kind of show people that like they give a crap, even if it is something so small, right? It makes you feel at least okay. Well, it's like the thank you to the congressman.
right? It's that, and it's also it's it lifts the fear from other people because I speak out about Israel. I have nothing I won't speak out about. I don't have a line, right? But there are other people who will, they'll talk about, too big to fail or something, but they don't want to get into foreign policy because they're scared it'll hurt their career or whatever. But if you can show that, look, this person is saying all these things and they're still successful and they're supported, then they're not as scared, and so it lifts that veil of fear away so more people start speaking out. Like I usually wear a t-shirt that says end all aid to Israel. Like this, I'll wear it as a billboard. People are like, aren't you scared to walk around like that? Like when I'm in the US, I'm like, no, I wore these shirts every day in LA, in New York, in DC. All I got was big thumbs up.
Really?
Yeah, because the ones, I'm kind of a big person, but so maybe it just didn't want to say anything, but you're talking about less than 1% of the population that is like, no, I want to racially colonize kids, like, come on. Everybody knows. Anyway, or they either don't know what it means, or if they do, they're like, right on, because we should not be supporting racial apartheid. Now, what are they going to say something mean to you? Like, oh, what? What? You want to bulldoze down the house and do this? I mean, come on. It's our money. We shouldn't be sending $30 billion in aid to anybody.
Yeah, well, we certainly don't have the money to spend. And it's crazy, the way that tax day rolls around and everybody says, nobody likes to pay taxes, but they are so convinced that you have to pay them, otherwise there would just be no society. Sorry, the world would completely explode if we didn't have taxes, and if we didn't have government. I mean, that's pushing it further, but
I
it
always point
amazes
out
me.
that up to the end of the Civil War, all of America's roads, railroads, and canals were built by venture capitalists without a single dime from government. So they're about my roads. You know who will build them? We will, just like we used to. You don't need a government middleman to do these things. And, you know, we have privatized post office now, and we're showing that no, it can be done. We even have a private space program. You can go to space, completely private business, like all these things. You think they're like, oh, how in the world would we ever build a road? Where you're like, you see this thing, this cell phone is a lot more complicated than putting asphalt on the ground. That was built by private companies. You know, like they're it's something else, man. They're like, oh, but I just can't imagine any other way to do these things. And like, well, we used to do them. The income tax didn't exist until 1914 because it was December in 13. You know, and we got along fine without it. It's theft. When especially for wealthy people, they're taking up to 33 to 35% of their money in taxes. That's a third of their income, which means for every 3 years they work one of those years for free. That's part-time slavery. You think about it. They're taking a third of your income. So that every third year you're working, you just work that entire year for free.
Holy cannoli, that's
People
terrifying.
people
It's
don't
so
think about it like
upsetting.
that, but when you say math at people, 33% rather than but you have to put that in perspective with
No, I
concrete
agree.
examples. You
Hmm.
are a part-time slave. You're working every third year for free to the government who's not helping you. You're wasting it on complete BS and cocaine and hookers and everything. Pedophilia with Dennis Hastert, Speaker of the House. It's disgusting. Don't pay these people that. And that's just one of your taxes. That's just your income tax.
Yeah,
You
and
got a
then all the
sales tax, a property
fines,
tax, and all that. Like
parking ticket, this registration, that
those
registration. They're
pirates,
fleecing people.
you're probably taking half your money. So you're a part-time slave. That's what taxation is, theft.
Yeah,
Inflation is also theft.
bingo. Yeah,
Taxes
I've
get you
seen.
bigger.
I'm kind of appalled when I went. I've been and visited. Do you know the Silk Road case?
The Silk Road case.
Hmm.
Mm-mm.
With the Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road, the online website that was basically a free market, and they sold drugs on it.
Oh yeah. I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So my friend is.
5:30 a.m. I had a total brain fart right there.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay because I was like, I'm pretty sure you know
I
about
was
this.
thinking the Silk Road, like the trade route, like nothing,
The
not even.
Chinese one, of course. So that's
Yeah,
the OG.
I'm a history
Um,
person, so.
but I've been to visit Ross in prison, and I never really realized how slavery is alive and well with the prison industrial complex. I mean, we're out, but we're almost like happy little slaves. Give us a little toy, a little jiggle, and then we just keep kind of feeding the monster. But with
Farm
the
animals
prison system itself, yeah, farm animals.
and
It's about right.
sweatshops.
Yeah.
I
Um,
call it offshore slavery.
yeah, really scary stuff. But I like your approaches. I hope that you'll join us again. Well, me, Josh isn't here today. um, but yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Please go and check out anc.report. Follow Ryan on Twitter at Rye Liberty, and his YouTube is RYS, like Sam, to the number sense, like be sensible and end the wars.
You're like
Thanks very
common sense.
much.
Yeah, thanks. We covered a lot of ground. I appreciate it. I
Oh,
would be
definitely. I'm
more
excited.
on if it wasn't so late or early, however it is.
No, it was chill and very understandable. So thanks very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.